Clay, I'm sorry I missed out on our scheduled recording last night. I was looking forward to having a conversation about this episode called Requiem for Gleet. But I was wondering if you'd be willing to have the same conversation this morning with me right now.
Well, bang the drums and ring the pipes, and I'll rend our fucking garments, my friend.
I think I always misunderstand what rend garments means. It means to tear them, right?
Right. That's what I thought. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'm not. Maybe
Just
I was
freaking out, tearing your clothes off.
Yeah, like the like some X-rated Pied Piper or something like that. Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe I'm not misunderstanding, but I guess because it rhymes with mend. Maybe that's why I'm confusing myself. And to render,
sure.
is to render to destroy something? Is that the same meaning?
It can be, yeah. Because I mean, you think of like a meat rendering plant,
right?
It's like stripping down animals and stuff.
the most brutal of it's not a. Don't be alarmed, children. It's not actually a floor.
It's more of a grating where
allows the internal organs of blood to flow through.
Yes.
So
R.I.P. Phil Hartman.
Yep.
It's anniversary, I think, a couple days ago.
Yeah. Of the anniversary of his death.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because he must have only been in a few seasons of The Simpsons too at that point. Probably less than I would guess, right?
Let's see. This is if I'm assuming it's 30th anniversary, so 93. So he would have been in 4 seasons.
Wow, that's it.
Yeah, 4 seasons. Yeah.
I guess Lionel Hutz was in a lot of episodes of The Simpsons or something like that.
Well, he did so many different. He did a bunch of. I'm sorry. He died.
He died later than that?
He died in 98.
Okay.
So it must be the 25th anniversary. That's okay.
Makes more sense.
So, yeah,
he did news radio, too, which would have taken up that middle period. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you hear? I like how we started this talking about Deadwood, but then quickly turned it into The Simpsons and Phil Hartman. But I had heard just recently that apparently Andy Dick was the person responsible for getting Phil Hartman's wife hooked on drugs.
Yeah, that's the story.
Again?
I guess. Yeah. Oh, again,
then,
or like obviously
she
leading
had,
up to her problem or her.
Yeah, she had a drug problem. Then when, I guess when he was on news radio, she crossed paths with Andy Dick, who has his own demons.
Yeah,
and sent her back down a dark path. And John Lovitz confronted him about it at some point afterwards, after Phil Hartman had died. And he said something like, "Watch out, you'll be next." And John Lovitz punched him in the face. That's the story anyway.
Yeah, Andy Dick's a weird character. Like, what a strange periphery of a Hollywood character to have just hanging around and stuff like that. Like, he's been in stuff you would notice, but I wouldn't say he's a name actor or anything like that. So he occupies a weird space in the actor hierarchy, I think.
Yeah, I feel like he every single person on news radio who wasn't Phil Hartman, I feel like fell into that category, at least until one of them got a successful, controversial podcast, and the other one became one of the most beloved character actors of all time.
Yeah.
But that was the episode. That was the show where it's like, I thought the redhead on the show was Kathy Griffin, but it wasn't. It was some other redhead approximation of that character. Andy Dick was kind of similar to one or two other characters or actors who were on TV at the time.
Yeah.
You know, it was a lot of like, I don't want to say, I feel like the top rung is already B level. So let's say like at the time, like C level personalities or like newer people. But, and obviously Phil Hartman and Stephen Root.
Yes. Yep. Andy Dick was on the Stiller show, that sketch comedy show that happened for a little bit too.
Oh, that's right.
That led into that. Anyway, this is a Deadwood podcast. We will talk about Deadwood. We're up to Requiem for Gleet. So we are going to take a break. We'll play the music. We'll come back and we'll break it down.
You're listening to a podcast that is a lie agreed upon. Join Wes and Clay as they discuss HBO's Deadwood and tell you something pretty.
Requiem for Gleet is the 4th episode of the 2nd season of Deadwood, directed by Alan Taylor, who's a famous HBO name at this point, written by Ted Mann, In this episode, Carrie arrives in town, arriving on the same stage as Hugo Jari, the Lawrence County Commissioner, who immediately seeks outside Tolliver at the Bella Union. Carrie arrives at the Chez Amis. Doc Cochran attends to the ever more desperate Swearengen and suggests surgery to cut into his bladder and remove his kidney stones. Jerry tells Tolliver and Wolcott of new rules that will apply to gold claims in the territory. Starr tells Bullock that he has news from Denver about their proposal to start a bank. A distraught Miss Isernhausen calls on Adams and convinces him that the widow Garret is going to kill her. Wolcott tells Tolliver that a new Chinaman in town, Mr. Lee, will now provide opium to Tolliver to sell in the camp. Wolcott
also known as the tall cocksucker from San Francisco.
Yeah, the San Francisco cocksucker, a.k.a. San Francisco cocksucker, which is very close to the San Francisco treach, which is rice-a-roni, but we won't confuse the two in this podcast. Did you? My favorite. This is like borderline connect. It's borderline connected just from San Francisco cocksucker. You know how in poker all the hands have a name on them, like there's the dead man's hand and stuff like that.
Sure, yeah.
Do you know what? My favorite is mildly offensive, but it's the San Francisco busboy.
Okay.
It's a queen with a tray.
Oh boy.
San Francisco cocksucker, it works. Wolcott visits the Chez Amis and has a brief... Did I read this? Yes. Wolcott visits the Chez Amis and has a brief sexual encounter with Carrie. You might try sometime with your prick outside your pants, she tells him. We've all heard that before, but Wolcott just brings it to life on the screen. So this is it, Requiem for Gleet, which I don't know if it's... When did Requiem for a Dream come out? Is this sort of a parody title of that movie? It probably came out before this, I think, right?
Requiem for a Dream.
99? Was that Requiem when that came out?
Requiem for a Dream was 2000.
Yeah, okay. So it could be a reference to that. So this is Requiem for a Gleet. Swearengen's kidney stones or bladder stones, I guess. I was reading up on them. I guess they can be confused, although bladder stones are much more serious than kidney stones, I guess. So I think he has bladder stones. But anyway, it's regardless. He's got his, whatever Dan Doherty says, his piss plumbing's all plugged up or something like that. And he's got piss in his lungs, and Adams can't believe it. Tolliver and all that is working together to buy the gold claims from the miners. Wolcott is sort of dancing around the campsite and visiting the mining operations and everything like that. So what did you think about Requiem for a Gleet, Clay?
It was good. I'm finding it harder to track the dialogue in the show. And I don't know if it's because they are leaning into their thing more, but there were a few scenes that I had to watch twice in order to figure out what the hell they were talking about, because it was so densely scripted as far as the way that they were kind of talking around stuff, or the style and of the dialect that they were choosing to use.
Are the scenes, I guess the question for me would be, are the scenes related to what Wolcott and Tolliver and Hearst and all them are doing, or are they other scenes outside of that?
Yeah, it's mostly those ones.
Because I sort of wonder about that, which is that the plot that they're involved in is sort of like abstract and off screen, really. Like it's they're doing what they're planning to do, but the idea of what they're doing is not really physically visible in it. It's just a bunch of conversation between those characters about what's going on.
Yeah, like the one that I definitely had to rewatch, which I'm glad I am actually glad I did, was the Ellsworth and
Alma,
what's her name?
Wolcott.
Ellsworth and Alma.
Yeah,
where he's telling her basically everybody thinks that the dams are going to break, and so they're trying to sell everything, but he thinks that it's going to. Yeah, like I really like that scene.
Yeah,
because it this episode was a great Ellsworth episode because it's really they're really taking a character who seemed like sort of a throwaway gold mining character and giving him some stuff to do, and giving him a history with Hearst is really interesting, and just making him seem like a more important character who actually has some agency and some interesting stuff to say and do.
Yeah, has like a backstory and his own point of view about things too. With this is probably his most impressive episode so far. Just he only really has those 2 scenes, but it does flesh out his background as someone who previously worked on at least the Comstock mines, which are a famous Hearst gold mine in Nevada, I think. And apparently things didn't go well there. That's what he knows Wolcott from.
The conversation with him and Wolcott was one where I was like, okay, I get what's going on here, but I don't exactly know what they're talking about, because they keep saying Comstock, and I'm like, is that a thing? I'm assuming that's a mine.
Yeah, it's a location. I think it's a place.
Yeah, and I understood that like they did something incorrectly and the mine collapsed and a bunch of people died or whatever. But that they were kind of talking around it a little bit, where, and I'm not wishing that they did give you a bunch of exposition, because who gives a shit. But
yep.
Again, the show just takes a little bit more attention to really parse things out. But I hate to say this, but I feel like they're pushing it a bit too far with EB, because I liked his sort of soliloquy sort of stuff that he was doing, but this one, and I feel like the last one, it feels like they're making his verbiage like way too complicated.
Yep.
It seems like they're doing it just to see how complicated they can possibly make his dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Are you talking about his scene with Richardson, or are you talking about something else?
Yes. Yeah. And it's like I don't know. It felt, this was the first time where I felt like, all right, I feel like they're pushing this a bit too far with him.
Hello. What's your business? Francis Wolcott. My name's Ellsworth, Mr. Francis Wolcott. Can you hear me? Yes, sir. How do you do? I'm well. Glad you make me out. Yes, sir. Because them as poke around Miss Garrett's workings without a by your leave ain't welcome, Mr. Wolcott, and you ought not to repeat your fucking mistake. Well, that's an uncivil response to an innocent error. Did you work in the Comstock when you was beardless? I did. For Mr. George Hearst has a keen eye for the color? As a geologist for Mr. Hearst. You have the advantage of me, Mr. Ellsworth. That ain't a possibility, Wolcott. No more than an error of yours would be innocent. I do dimly recall an Ellsworth. Superintended the Consolidated Virginia operation. I don't give a fuck what you recall. A hero. Dug a week without respite to save 3 poor souls from the cave-in. And 46 corpses in a fucking hole that ought never to have been dug. Always a choice. Count the saved or lost. Get off this property. Just as a man opposed to inevitable change needn't invariably be called a Luddite. Another choice might be simply to describe him as slow in his process. You tell that cocksucker you work for, the next surrogate he sends oughtn't to be bloody from the Comstock.
As I mentioned before in the previous episodes, I always thought that the first half of season 2 was like the weakest stretch of the show. Mm-hmm. And watching it this time, I actually think differently about it. I don't think it's necessarily weaker, but I think that it is, it's possibly what you're describing. It's a little bit more like oblique about what's going on.
Yeah.
It's not nearly as obvious, and there's not a kind of like, Swearengen has been taken off the board. There's not a sort of like physical fisticuffs that's going on. There's not a lot of scenes of characters confronting each other and talking to each other. Mm-hmm. and arguing in the way that Seth and Swearengen did in the first season and things like that. It's mostly Wolcott walking around in the background causing problems for things. People either recognizing him or not recognizing him and deciding how to react to him in that way. So you have like Ellsworth on one hand and you have Tolliver on the other one in terms of how people deal with Wolcott. And a lot of the plotting that's going on is it's the same thing what happened the first. It's not especially complicated, but they talk about it in a way that makes it sound complicated, more complicated than what it is. Yeah. So nothing much has really changed in terms of like Hearst is trying to get the miners to sell their claims for pennies on the dollar so that he can buy them all up and then kick everybody out and have everything. He's doing that by spreading rumors through Tolliver and less effectively through EB to sort of like cause problems and to have people sell. He's also basically bought out the government in the form of Hugo Jari, who's this new commissioner that's been sent in. So
Needle-nosed Ned the Head, Ned Ryerson. You know him.
Yeah. What's the reference from? I know I was going to say the famous version. I know is the character from Memento.
Oh yes, shit.
The guy who actually had the problem, or maybe
Right.
didn't have the problem. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I can't remember what his name is.
So he's got Jari in his pocket, and they are coming together to sort of legitimize how they're going to take all the claims from people and then split them up. In the conversation they have is funny because it sounds like they're legitimately considering having like a fair like lottery system that's going to determine who gets the claims. But obviously it's all tongue in cheek and they're sort of making fun and being sarcastic about what they're doing. But I think that's the problem that I see with the like conceptualizing what's going on in the second season is that it's a little bit more vague about where the threats are coming from. The thing that I like about it that I never really noticed before or never really internalized by watching it this way is that what it's done so far early on is it's doing this really effective job of building the darkness that's coming. Basically, like there's they're really getting into this idea that like a bad thing is coming. A lot of the characters in this episode talk about like an impending problem or like burning things down. There's a fire that keeps getting referenced. Right. They're going to burn things down. They can't get to that point. Wolcott tells Ellsworth that fate is dark or fate is painful or something like that when he's talking to him at the mining shaft. And I think that they know the Maddie and Joni talk about the girl that has to be sort of sacrificed on the altar. Wolcott doesn't even know what's going on, but he's talking about the same thing. So they're hinting at there's a lot of foreshadowing about the badness that's coming, and it's how everyone is sort of setting up to deal with Wolcott. And it all ties into what we talked about before, which is that Swearengen has been effectively removed from the situation, so you're seeing how everyone else is going to interact with him and deal with that stuff. Yeah. But I find it in a way that I might have found it slow or something early on. I'm intrigued by it this time around, and I think that it's low key, but it's really effective in where they're bringing things to, and it's kind of a slow build, but I'm finding it enjoyable this time in a way that I previously hadn't.
Yeah, I am also enjoying it because I do think it's I think it does take a bit to kind of see where they're pulling the net from and how the pieces are going to kind of pull together. But I like the Wolcott character, and I like what he is, what he represents, and I like that they're not playing their hand too heavily. Like, we made the Silver Surfer comparison the last episode.
Yeah.
And I think they're playing it well, where he's this weird malevolent force, but all he really needs to do is just be there for people to start freaking out and like getting antsy.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to keep throwing Hearst's name around. Most of the time, other people are the ones who bring it up first, unless he really wants to back somebody down. But
yeah, unless he has to tell EB who he is. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting because he's. I wonder, do you think that they are giving him this weird sexual violence thing as a way to compensate for the fact that all he kind of does is just sort of exist otherwise? Because, you know what I mean? It's like...
You feel they need to up his intimidation factor?
I'm not saying I think that's what they're doing or anything, or that I don't like it, but I'm just curious. I'm just thinking out loud about it because he is such sort of a passive character at the moment that I wonder if they're giving him that darker side just to make sure that he remains like
a threat, basically.
A threat. Yes, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, I guess it's a good place to start is Wolcott, because I think Wolcott's a pretty interesting character.
Yeah, I do too.
Wolcott, to me, he It's maybe not like exactly clear what he's supposed to represent, but I do like he represents Hearst's interests, right? So, and I mean, I don't know if I mentioned, like, Hearst is just one of my favorite villains, antagonists of all time. He doesn't show up until the end of the season, but like his Wolcott embodies a lot of what makes Hearst so interesting, except for the fact that he's clearly like a damaged person too. Like,
oh, definitely.
So what's interesting about Wolcott is that you were saying to make him intimidating or to add a sort of like a threat behind him, there's the sexual violence thing. What I find funny about the sexual violence is that the sexual violence stuff, which he hasn't actually been sexually violent, really. Not like he's kind of pushed the girls around. He's not exactly nice to the prostitutes, but we're more told that he does things than we've actually seen him do things. The sexual encounters that he has are funny to me because they're almost more embarrassing than empowering to him, you know?
Right, yeah.
And I think that's what the construction of the character is supposed to represent, is that he's this sort of brutal, evil, malevolent force that's coming in, and he represents this larger change of like the world outside the camp that's coming in, on all like the wolves are circling the camp and the people with power are starting to show up and they're going to start taking things from people. But Wolcott himself is so damaged and broken as a person that he can't even have like a human to human sexual connection. Like he just comes in his pants, basically. Like there's no
right.
He's so broken and so in this like fantasy world where nothing is actually a connection for him, that I think he just represents kind of like the psychotic edge of the forces that are coming into camp, which is that they're unable to have the human connections that the people in the camp are starting to have. It's a very cold, evil, I'm going to take what you have, and to do that, I have to not be able to empathize with you. I have to not be able to connect with you at all. And so I think that's what Wolcott is, because I always find his sexual violence to be more just like awkward and sort of like he's play acting a role. Like he's trying to pretend he is something. Amy's watching the House of Hammer documentary on like HBO Max, which is about Armie Hammer and his weirdness.
Sure, yeah.
And I get a lot of Armie Hammer vibes from it, which is like the guy's clearly mentally ill, but like the text that he's sending, obviously he did bad things, but the text that Armie Hammer was sending were like so performative and over the top, you know, that I can see why some of the women were confused about him, because it's so weird. And I feel that Wolcott is kind of the same way, which is that he's kind of acting this role and he's not very good at it, and he's insecure, and that's potentially where the violence comes from, because he tells, I think her name is Carrie in this one, she says, "Don't hit me," and he says something along the lines of like she never gives him reason to, which I assume is that they laugh at him or something like that.
And you mustn't hit me like you do the others.
You have never displeased me.
Don't fucking hit me, Francis.
Done. Agreed.
I will run away to the Indians.
You would change the course of history. Be the first of the women chiefs. Oh. I'm too quick.
You can't be too quick for me.
Yeah, he I mean, nothing he's doing to the women screams control. I should say it screams control from him, but it's not like, it doesn't feel
he's no
genuine.
Ted Bundy. He's no like suave guy who is tricking women into their death, basically.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, even the stuff that he's doing where he's like making all the girls stand facing away from him and not looking at him and stuff. It never feels like he's doing it as, excuse me. it never feels like he's doing it as a dom who's in control. It feels like that's what he wants to be, but he's just kind of, like you're saying, he's kind of play acting at it. So it feels kind of, I mean, Carrie seems to know the deal with him in that he's kind of all talk to an extent.
Yeah, because she's so confident with him, you mean, and just she can tell him what to do. Yeah, because he does come across as he wants to be the dominant one, but in the bedroom he's actually more the submissive one in that case. And I think that's his play acting thing. And I think it comes down to the casting too, because Wolcott and Dillhunt's tall, but he's not exactly, I wouldn't call him like a physically imposing presence, you know?
Yeah, he's pretty lanky for the most part.
Lanky, and a decent sized guy, but not someone that you're going to, not someone who just screams like there's trouble brewing with this guy. You know, he seems a little bit more meek than that. So I feel that kind of fades into it too. But yeah, Wolcott is I think that's why he's so strange and why he's almost difficult to gauge, because he's set up clearly to be a bad person that no one should like, but at the same time he's pathetic enough where you kind of sympathize with him somewhat. Like he's not outright in control of the situation. He sets things up this season to Hearst's advantage, but I wouldn't say that he is in control of the situation at large. It's more that he's just a fairly effective person at what his job is supposed to be, and outside of that, in his personal life, he's kind of in shambles.
Yeah, he seems to be. He seems like he's the second in command who wants to prove that he's the big boss, right? You know, and so he takes his shortcomings out on people that he can get over on, which is prostitutes.
Yeah, yes, yeah, and it continues. You can look at it too, the thematics of the oppression of women and stuff like that in the era, and Wolcott's the kind of person that would come in and be worse to them. And the prostitutes are the most obvious example too of just like the theme to me is largely what people are willing to sacrifice to get the money that Hearst and Wolcott represent. Like Maddie's whole thing about this one is that the whole reason she's doing this is that she wants to have, she basically wants to make enough money to walk away from stuff, and before she dies, she says she wants to have a comfortable retirement. And so she's making a choice to sacrifice one of the girls to Wolcott's tendencies, and everyone else in town is kind of following the same thing. I think there's a lot of emasculation going, not even just Wolcott, but like Tolliver is being emasculated and does not like it, but he's going along with it for the time being. He has that scene with Lee and Wolcott where they talk about how they're going to start bringing in the Chinese prostitutes and selling opium, and Tolliver can be in control of that. And Tolliver just has some line about like, he normally doesn't like to not know what the fuck is going on, but he's at a point in his career now where he's like, it's kind of relaxing, but you can tell it irritates him to not be. He's so snarky towards Lee and Wolcott in that scene that you can tell it's sort of irritating him that he's not actually the honcho anymore. He's just more of a hired hand for somebody else.
Mr. Lee will provide opium to you exclusively for sale to whites in the camp. You will receive 50% of the gaming proceeds from Celestial's Alley.
My men lamped the take. A spare Mr. Lee here, explaining how slow business was because of Buddha's wedding anniversary.
Your men lamped the take. Also on proceeds from Celestial prostitutes. How many do you want?
How many can you bring?
How many?
That sounds like a man with an inexhaustible supply. How much English do you have, my friend? Maybe when we get to know each other better. I'll take a dozen. I don't want him fucked out. I set the rates, the upkeep's on him.
And my understanding is the upkeep is quite minimal.
Good. Gives him more to spend on mahjong. I won't question the apparent one-sidedness of our arrangement.
The arrangement is not yours and Mr. Lee's alone.
Yes, and in ways I don't understand. It must benefit you and the man whose name I must never say to have Mr. Lee in camp and perhaps Mr. Wu out of it. Maybe among the spirits of his ancestors. And what a blessing for me, finally to reach a point in life where I don't feel I have to know.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where Tolliver heads in this season, because I do feel like he's getting the short end of the stick a bit so far. In that everybody else has so much going on when he's just sort of facilitating for the Wolcott storyline, you know?
Yeah. Do you get any sense of him about how he feels about that, I guess? Or is
well,
it
no,
just
I would agree with you. I think that they are playing it. Everything we've seen up to this point is him sort of in this position where he doesn't really know what's going on, which I think is fun, because he does position himself as someone who seems to know everything that's happening, but he really doesn't know that much.
Yeah. And I mean, he still has that kind of aura, because Joni has that scene with Dan where she's talking about she'll burn the gem down if Tolliver tries to take over. So there's at least this front of Tolliver seeming as if he's in control, which is her plan all along, to have Tolliver be the front that buys up all the claims. But everyone in town at least seems to be buying into the idea that Tolliver is doing this without any other kind of backing behind him.
You know, that makes so much more sense to me, because I was very confused, because I got the names wrong in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And when she was saying, will you help me burn this place down if Tolliver takes over, I thought in my head, when she said Tolliver, I thought she meant Bosch.
Oh, Silas Adams. Oh, I see, because those two are fighting with each other too.
Because he's fighting with Dan, and he's got that connection to Yankton or whatever. And I think just Tolliver and Silas, for some reason, I put those two names together, and I don't know why. And so when she said that, I was like, why does she think that Bosch is going to try to take the place over?
He can't even have a meeting with Al. He's got no power. Yeah, she just reflects the Tolliver taking over aspect. Did you have any? I mean, I thought this episode stuck out to me. I didn't write down a lot of this stuff, so hopefully my clip selection will be able to carry us through a lot of this, because I won't be able to do it justice. But I thought that this episode had a lot of great dialogue lines in particular. I thought that some of the conversations between characters were really great, like just apropos of nothing. In the Ellsworth and Wolcott scene where they're talking about their prior history with each other. Wolcott says, I do dimly recall when Ellsworth superintended the consolidated Virginia operations, and Ellsworth says that, I guess so he wasn't at the Comstock for that one, he was somewhere else. Ellsworth says, I don't give a fuck what you recall. Wolcott says, a hero dug a week without respite to save 3 poor souls from a cave-in. Ellsworth says, and 46 corpses in a fucking hole that ought never to have been dug. Wolcott has this great line after that. He says, always a choice to count the saved or the lost, which is just goes to the dehumanizing nature of Wolcott there. It's an interesting thing to say, which is that you focus on either how many died or how many you saved, but Wolcott is the dehumanized capitalistic Hearst force, and so he the death doesn't matter to them in what they're trying to do, so he ignores the 46 that died, and he focuses on the 3 that lived, and Ellsworth is the opposite.
Yeah, I thought that scene was really great. And you know, it only takes 2 scenes to make Ellsworth a much more sympathetic and interesting character than he was before, you know, because he'd just been the guy watching over and tending. It makes more sense, because we were kind of joking earlier, I think, about how he's such a shit kicker, panning gold miner.
Yeah.
That why does he know how to get this whole operation up?
Oh, right. How does he get the quartz pounding machines up and everything
right,
like that? Yeah.
Right. And so clearly he has a history with this, and which I think is a really smart move. And the way that I just love the way, I continue to love the way that they give you information and backstory about these characters, because it's never in a way they never do that thing that all modern TV does. Usually they do it right before they kill the character, but where they just like focus on him for an episode and give you like flashbacks. And
we haven't had the Ellsworth 50-minute episode of Deadwood to this point.
Right. Yeah. That ends with him getting shot in the face.
Yeah.
they lay it out in such a way that doesn't feel like they're bringing attention to it, and by doing that, it makes it feel more real, and it makes it feel easier to sympathize with, I think.
Yeah. I love that. I completely agree. I think that scene, the Ellsworth and Wolcott scene, is just really well done in terms of the characters saying a lot without particularly saying too much to each other. Like just the setup for it, which is that Ellsworth recognizes Wolcott, and so all of Wolcott's very effective lies, right? Like Wolcott, Dillahunt doesn't play that scene as though Wolcott is obviously lying to Ellsworth about everything. He plays it very straight. But the only reason Ellsworth sees through it is because he knows the history of him. And so it's all this great dialogue about sure is, something will happen like you Wolcott wouldn't be making an innocent error, because he apologizes for an innocent error when he tells him to fuck off or something like that. And he's he knows him well enough to say that you coming here is not an innocent error. Nothing you're doing right now, spreading the rumors, is just a happenstance kind of thing. Like, this is all part of your plan, what's come along. And I just like it because the dialogue just highlights how much of a performance both of the characters are doing, because neither are acting in the way that makes the dialogue seem obvious, if that makes sense. So Wolcott is not twisting his mustache or as he's telling a lie the audience knows is a lie to Ellsworth, and Ellsworth calls him out on it. It's the thing of you almost feel sorry for Wolcott, because Ellsworth just comes on so hot and is like, what the fuck are you doing here? Get the fuck out of here. And you're like, hey, how do you can't talk to him like that. He hasn't done anything wrong. And I think it does a really good job of that stuff.
Listen, I don't like what Wolcott says, but I will defend with my life his right to say it.
His right to stand there and watch the courts be pounded into dust. Yeah, and there's just the little lines too, with when EB and Alma have their funny conversation.
I love that scene when she
tries to buy the hotel.
Yeah, that's such a great scene, because she knows from Ellsworth that what's the stuff that's going around is bullshit, and then EB starts chucking bullshit at her, and then she goes, "Oh well."
Doing the opposite of Wolcott, selling it badly.
Yes, yes.
Selling it badly. Yeah.
And so her response then is like, "Oh well, if you want to sell your place, I'd be happy to buy it from you."
Yeah, seeing how everything's going to hell in a handbasket, so you probably want to get rid of it.
She knows he's lying, and she's trying to force his hand. She's trying to get one over on him or whatever.
Yeah.
But and it was so good to watch him squirm away and her have the upper hand with him.
He keeps bumping his head.
Because he seems like the kind of asshole who would actually sell it to her just to maintain appearances,
right?
And come away thinking like he got her,
Yeah.
Mrs. Garret, what male would not trade our small superiority of intellect to possess that gift of intuition so bountifully bestowed on the lesser sex?
Mr. Farnham, your meaning is beyond me.
I imagine you, madam, awakening the other morning, suddenly and for no earthly reason, convinced the camp was at peril. My goal should be spirited to Denver. I imagine you thinking, maybe as you brushed your hair, and without worrying the conviction or studying upon it, sending the gold away.
At peril. Mr. Farnham, the camp. Oh, your meaning is beyond me.
Ma'am, if a Nubian genie were at my disposal, I'd see his great nigger fingers whisk up my hotel and deposit it in Denver, just as you did your gold.
Because the camp's at peril.
Yes, madam, yes, peril. Worse than peril.
Perhaps you should sell.
Mrs. Garret, had I your intuition, would I not have done?
I'll buy it.
Aren't you wonderful and kind and intuitive and generous? No, I couldn't burden you, nor impose upon your generosity, tremendously wealthy as you are.
Name your price, Mr. Farnham. We'll close the transaction now.
Now you unsettle and trifle with me, and make me nervous and uncertain.
My intention is quite otherwise. And intuition.
Oh, your intuition?
Name your price. How do you males put it? Shit or get off the chamber pot?
Oh, Mrs. Garret. Shit indeed. Oh, dear.
He's so well, like he comes into that, right? And he has this funny opening line, which is like, he's like, although the men of the male sex has the superiority of intellect, I would give it just an inkling of a woman's intuition, you know? So he starts it off with this weird backhanded compliment. And then Alma embarrasses him in that sort of discussion where he realizes that he's cornered and he gets embarrassed and he can't sell his hotel. And then she walks away and he just calls her like a haughty cunt under his breath. And it's like, it's just such a perfect little encapsulation scene of what EB is. You know, it's just like he's this incompetent, overly verbose, sweaty palmed, like he has none of the capacity of Swearengen to like sell the lie in any way. Right. He's performatively trying in the way that Wolcott's trying to be the Dom of these situations. He's like performatively trying to be Al and stuff like that, and he just always backfires on him.
And Al, up to this point, hasn't had to drop the N-word to do it. And EB gives us the first N-word of Deadwood.
Is that just, Genie?
He hustled his way through that word, too. I got the feeling he was not comfortable saying it. Yes, nor should he be.
There's a character coming up who's going to make everyone extremely uncomfortable, I think. Then. Do you think of genies as black, I guess? Like maybe it's just Aladdin as like, obviously they're not blue skinned, but like I never thought of them as black skinned.
No, but I mean I could see the connection being they come from a Middle Eastern tradition, I assume. I don't actually know if that's where they come from. But.
Yeah, Nubian means Sudan.
Okay,
Egypt.
Yeah, that makes sense then. The desert, Middle East, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's
an odd choice.
It is. I would have thought more. Maybe it's just Aladdin. I thought this was more of a Persian thing with the genies, but if it's not, it's an African tradition.
I don't know how discerning E.B. Farnham is going to be on skin color when it comes to what region of the Middle East or Africa the genie comes
I expect my genies to come out in polyester button-down dress shirts with bad cologne. That's the way that I expect it.
Doing impressions of Johnny Carson and...
No, we don't get any of that, unfortunately. But yeah, it's
Can we talk for a second about Robin Williams playing the genie? Because in retrospect, is that not one of the most insane performances? Because he spends the whole time doing these impressions. This is a children's movie. You and I watched this movie when it came out, I assume, and we were probably like 10 or so.
Have you seen it recently, Aladdin?
I haven't watched it recently, no.
Okay. Yeah.
Have you? Does it hold up?
Yeah. It doesn't hold up. Not that it doesn't hold up, but it's not as... I thought it was one of the Disney Renaissance movies, but I always put it as one of the top, and it's not one of the top movies.
Oh, it was always my favorite. It was always my favorite, but I think it was 99% because of Robin Williams. But,
yeah.
But said that still, like even look, he's in this kids movie doing insane impressions of people who've been dead for like 50 years.
Yes, it wasn't scripted, right? He must have been improving that, and they animated it.
He was, yes. As far as I know, he was improving that stuff.
Yeah.
Like who? I think I may have mentioned this on another show because I feel like I talked about this relatively recently. Maybe it was in my regular non-show life, which the sliver gets smaller and smaller.
Blurry.
But I only recently, there's one impression from that movie that I never knew what it was until like the last handful of years when I was watching this show on Netflix about Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley.
Yes.
And when I was watching that, I was like, oh my God, that's the one I didn't know. He does a William F. Buckley impression in Aladdin.
Yeah. Yep.
Every child's favorite conservative talking head.
It's a famous debate. He didn't have a chance to put Chomsky up there, I guess. Yeah. No, it's funny. It's he is probably the best part of Aladdin, but we could probably do Aladdin on the Patreon or something. It doesn't hold up as well. You know, it was surprising to me. Didn't like it as a kid, but Beauty and the Beast is clearly one of the best Disney movies. So
yeah.
I
think I would like that one more now.
You probably would.
I didn't dislike it, but I think, when I was a kid, it was like, well, it's a girl's movie.
Yeah, that's the prince and falling in love. It's the most beautiful Disney movie. It's the animation is gorgeous in it. Yeah.
Where are you on The Lion King?
It's overrated, but it's good.
I agree. I've never been a huge Lion King fan.
It's surprising watching it now. It's surprising how would you say this? Like it's a startlingly quick movie in some ways. Like it really doesn't. It's very short. It doesn't go deep into things, but it like there's sort of I don't know how to describe it. Like you don't see a lot of the growth of Simba really. Like he's a kid and then he becomes an adult and he goes back and that's the end of it and stuff like that. But
very Jesus Christ of him.
Yeah, it's Lion King is fine, but it's a little bit over it. It's in the top half, but it's not near the top for me either way. And the other way,
not even that sexy bedroom eyes from Nala.
Oh yeah, the fuck me eyes from Nala are deeply uncomfortable, and I'm surprised how many animators had to take to get that done.
Every generation has their Disney cartoon character that makes them feel funny. Mine was the female squirrel from Sword in the Stone.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
The female squirrel,
and also Maid Marian from Robin Hood,
the female fox version.
Yes.
Yeah. Is Robin Hood before the Renaissance? I think it is, right? That's like
it is. Yes,
it's the 80s.
Because, sorry to hijack this whole podcast, but those movies are some of the more interesting ones to watch. Though, because after Sleeping Beauty cost a shitload of money, and it compared to how much it cost, it didn't do well.
Yep.
And it was one of the last full ink and paint Disney movies. And so after that, it didn't do so well. So they had to figure out a cheaper way to make these movies. And so they fired everybody and developed this new system of animation where it was Xeroxing the pencils and they weren't inking them. They were just Xeroxing the pencils onto acetate.
Yep.
So when you watch movies from that era like Robin Hood and 101 Dalmatians is a big one, the animation, you can like see the pencil drawings, and it's a really, really cool look, and I've always loved that look, but it's so fascinating to find out that they did that because they needed to save money.
Yeah.
And so they essentially fired the whole ink and paint department and replaced it with a Xerox machine.
It was like AI coming early. They're like, oh my God, the Xerox.
So that's why you've got like your movies up through Sleeping Beauty are very clean. The line work is very clean. The animation is very smooth. And then once you get into the 70s, it's a lot choppier and a lot more expressive.
Yeah, well, Dalmatians was early then, right? So is the change happening earlier than that?
Yes, I believe 101 Dalmatians was the first one.
Okay, because Dalmatians might be in the 50s, right?
No, it's not. It's not that early.
Not that early. It's in the 60s.
61.
61. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that art style that you're describing is noticeable in Dalmatians, I think.
Yes, very much
just
so.
Because of the sheer amount of dog, I think, that you're seeing on this. It's still a neat animated one, just because of how how many dogs are on the screen that they had to draw.
We watched that once when Disney Plus first booted up. We went through and we watched a couple of the older ones, and 101 Dalmatians is great. It's really good.
It holds up. The kids like that one too. Yeah.
And I will say, the story of Sleeping Beauty is, take it or leave it, but that is one of the most amazing looking movies I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's the animation is unbelievable. The design work is unbelievable.
Have you seen Tarzan?
I have not seen Tarzan. I was off the Disney bandwagon.
Yeah.
By the time
we were too old for it. But that's a
Hunchback.
Neat,
Hunchback of Notre Dame. Was Hunchback? No, Pocahontas was where I drew the line. I made it through Lion King. And then I think that was probably my last one. And then Pocahontas and Hunchback, I never really watched those.
Yeah.
Mulan, never watched Mulan.
Yep. Yeah, same. Yeah, the Tarzan one, it looks cool. The movie is fine, but it's a neat looking. As they slowly started to move into like computer layers and stuff like that.
Yeah,
they would add sort of interesting stuff to look at. But we did cover Moana on the Patreon, so people can go look at that if they're interested in us talking about a movie that is not from the Disney Renaissance.
We did, and I am only just remembering now that we did that. And that seems like it was 200 years ago.
Coming up on the Patreon, we rank all the Disney movies. It takes 7 years, but we'll get it done. Back to Requiem.
Rescuers. Let's talk about Rescuers Down Under and the Aristocats.
The Aristocats. I'll get confused and watch the Aristocrats, and we'll be not be able to talk about what we're doing. So we talked about EB and Alma through their little scene of realizing what's going on. So people are seeing through Hearst's machinations with Wolcott and stuff like that, although a lot of people aren't. Marvin is not. I like Marvin the miner. And that's one who's, don't look over my shoulder when I draw my X.
I only hope, Marvin, you ain't privy to information that I ain't.
$600 US, Mr. Tolliver. Claim 16 above discovery.
That ain't responsive to my previous fucking statement, young man.
I'll tell you what, sir. It's the fucking altitude that's got to me.
I see.
Nosebleeds and every fucking thing else.
Well, your health's got to come first. Leon! Light as my kit's got. We can go ahead and say done. $600, Con.
Right here, sir.
Cy Tolliver dealing with him, all that nonsense.
Who's the guy with no ears? We've never seen him before, right?
No, he's what is his name? It's
Eamon?
It's Eamon, but his name is God damn it. It's like something ear. It starts with a C when you tear something off.
Oh, I don't remember.
Deadwood. Eamon. I gotta look it up. Crop ear. Yeah, crop ear. Yeah. We have not seen him before, but there's another example of backstory. You get a backstory of Dan in this episode about where Dan came from, which is that he was one of Crop Ear's allies or whatever, and then Al came into town.
Honestly,
yeah,
I was having a hard time tracking what the hell they were talking about.
Oh,
I knew it was something to do with, there was some sort of robbery that he wanted Al in on.
Yes.
But I was not totally tracking what the connection between him and Dan was.
Eamon is trying to bring a job to Al, and Dan is trying to disguise the fact that Al is sick, and Crop Ear is being very irritating about it. But Dan and Crop Ear have a history that they came from the same sort of gang of bushwhackers or whatever, just out causing trouble.
Gotcha.
Until Al came in, and obviously Crop Ear holds it personally because the thing he says before he dies is that he says now he's just a cunt who stands behind a bar, basically. So they don't look highly on what Dan's choice of career has become at this point, but he pays the ultimate price for it.
I have a question about Dan.
Yep.
Towards the end of the episode, it might be during the if we all burn it down sequence. Trixie says to Dan, "Don't die with your secret."
Yeah.
What is she talking about?
Your creature walking around on hind legs. Just like Crop Ear, them half-dozen bushwhackers out in the forest. Ones I'd fall in with or out, whatever suited my daily purpose. That's what I was, till I crossed paths with Al.
We'll bang the drum and play the pipes, and I'll rend our fucking garments.
I was just saying.
I ain't hearing confessions this afternoon. Say you'll burn it down with me, Dan.
What?
This fucking place. Before letting Tolliver take it over.
Done?
Well, open your mouth, Jewel, and say something we can't fucking understand.
He's asking for you.
Don't die with your fucking secret.
She's talking about the fact that what Al means to him. It's what they were just talking about. It's the fact that Al's like all the characters. Al's important in this one because Al's revealed to be sort of a semi-savior to a lot of the characters, where his importance to them is meaningful, and it culminates in that scene where they're all sort of lying in bed with him after he's gotten his kidney stones out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I believe that she's talking about, because Dan opens that scene by talking about how Al basically saved him from that croppier lifestyle and like gave him more of a purpose and a meaning. And Trixie is just saying, don't just talk to me about it. Like, if he doesn't survive, you should tell him that before he dies.
Gotcha. Okay. Because I wasn't sure if they were implying even more than that Dan actually was like in love with Al.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Although you are predicting a funny joke that happens, I think, in the next episode. Yeah, so Al, I guess we can talk about Al for a little bit. Al doesn't have a single word of dialogue, I don't think, in this episode. He kind of goes at the end of it when he's looking at the camera. But other than that, I don't think he says anything, although he does seem to get his stones out in a good way. He doesn't have to go through the surgery that only 20% of the population would survive. He decides to go through the belly and not the taint, which is...
that was my favorite part of the episode, is when the doctor explains the surgery, and then Johnny just goes, below entails cutting through his taint.
That's right, Johnny. I like Doc's honesty here, which is like, I once watched a guy do something like this, and I think I could do it for you.
It's very much I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV energy.
Yeah. So it's what'd you think about Al and all the goings on around Al? I think it largely represents, the thing about Al is that it's what we've been talking about, which is that like Al started off as kind of the primary antagonist and like villain of the show, and he has not particularly moved into a better person, but everyone else who's coming after him is even more wolf-like and sort of like dehumanized in terms of their connections to the town. And so the people who are coming in are willing to do more extreme things to people to get the gold and the sort of abstract idea of like the wealth that's in the town. Al has a different relationship, which is that he is still part of the town. And, you know, the episode goes a long way to just showing like how important Al is to not just the people in that room when who sort of believe him to be family, or people who have prevented him from having to do another surgery that he might kill. You know, the doc is happy because Al prevented him from having to do a surgery where he might kill another person.
Right.
But even gets down to the technical. There's a scene where Saul, it's kind of a throwaway, but it ultimately builds towards it, where Seth and Saul have their conversation about how they're trying to start a bank with Denver's backing, and they don't have the capital to start up their liquidity. So they are considering how to do it, and they bring up Swearengen as an option as to how to get the cash to start up this bank. So Swearengen is important in a lot of ways to the town, in a way that it really feels like when he's suffering and gone, everyone is kind of noticing the fact that he's been yelling in pain. They don't know what they're going to do if he's gone at that point. Silas doesn't know who the boss is. Silas doesn't know how to recover from what he's threatened Jerry with if Swearengen doesn't come back into the show. So it's Al says a lot without saying anything in this episode, basically through the actions of the other characters.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought that stuff was really, really. They've been doing a good job showing how central he is to everything, and how taking him out of the equation kind of grinds a lot of stuff to a halt.
Yeah, he's. It's tough. It's because you do rely a lot on the other characters, and I do feel like I miss Swearengen when he's not in the show. Like you certainly lose an obviously like a very important character, but it somehow feels. I miss his sort of interactions with the other characters. Really, like he's such a unique voice that when he's not around, the show does feel slightly different. Even though I understand why they had to do it to sort of advance the plots that they've got going and stuff like that. But I am looking forward to getting him back, and I think he at least talks in the next episode. So I don't know if he's out and about, but he talks.
And I can't remember. I know you said it like just last episode, but that was like a million years ago in our time.
Mm-hmm.
They did this specifically because he was getting too popular and they needed to like even the field out? Is that what it was?
No, Milch just couldn't see how Wolcott could come in and accomplish what he needed to accomplish if Swearengen was aware of what was going on.
Sure, but it was HBO that was like, well, everybody likes this guy. Please don't do this.
Right. HBO's argument was that you can't eliminate the best character on the show for 25% of the season.
Well, somebody tell that to the X-Files season 7. Hold my beer.
Hold my beer. Is that the first? Is that like Mulder's replacement season?
Yeah, that's the season that Mulder leaves.
Okay.
And it's actually, was it 7, 8? Maybe it was 8. Anyway, there was one where it was just Scully and another person, and then there was the final season where it was essentially 2 new characters, and Scully sometimes showed up.
Oh wow, I didn't even know that happened. How long was Robert Patrick on the show for?
2 seasons, I think.
2 seasons.
It was him and Scully, and then it was him and Annabeth Gish, I believe.
Okay.
For a hot second in that final season.
Yep.
And that was it.
That was it. Interesting. You know the weirdest thing about Robert Patrick? His brother is the frontman of Filter.
Yes.
That's weird.
It is weird, yeah.
That's real strange.
Yeah. Has there ever been a show that has successfully handed the show off to a new cast of main characters and kept going? I guess it would, like something like Law and Order, maybe.
Yeah, Law and Order. It would have to be some kind of procedural thing, which the X-Files kind of was, but it's still too important to those characters to replace them.
Yeah, I feel like everybody always comes to a point where they try and it never works.
I mean, they did it half with House of Dragon, although I guess they're the same characters; they're just different actors or whatever. But,
yeah.
No, I can't think of a show that's like is the other one. Is there an AC/DC, which is that the lead character gets replaced and the show does better?
Oh, sure. Ooh.
NYPD Blue, maybe because Caruso got taken out and then it got popular.
Yeah. I know that. I don't know if it got better. I don't think it was on much long after this, but they did that on the TV version of Lethal Weapon.
Okay.
The guy who played Murtaugh.
Yep.
No, Riggs. Whatever the Mel Gibson part is. Like went nuts or something. I can't remember exactly what happened, but he ended up leaving the show, and he was ostensibly the lead of the show.
Yep.
Then they replaced him with Sean William Scott. And
okay.
I don't know how much longer the show lasted after that, but
maybe not a good example of it. Yeah. So, and just back to this, I found the writing in this episode to be really good. Hopefully, my clips make up for it, just because I didn't do a very good job of writing down the dialogue particularly. But I just liked the little one-offs in this one. I thought that they were very quotable. Ellsworth and Wolcott's. I think that Alma and them have good scenes together. I like EB's little soliloquy there, where he's trying to convince himself that he's not betraying Swearengen by what he's doing. It's good and quotable.
It is no disloyalty to be a realist, Richardson. We are mortal. One hopes for the best. One perseveres. One reevaluates constantly. One is an asshole if one doesn't. Loyalty expanded is not loyalty betrayed. I contemplate no disloyalty to Al Swearengen. I feel exposed. I don't like being weak, and I know that I am. I yearn to rely on a stronger will. I fear what I'm capable of in its absence. Whereas you, Richardson, know nothing of yourself. Are you shitting or going blind or on foot or horseback? You vile fucking lump!
Tolliver has some interestingly funny lines. There's no Charlie Utter or Calamity Jane or anything like that, unfortunately. But the rest of them are firing on a lot of decent cylinders, I think.
I noticed, this is completely arbitrary, but it just reminded me because of Charlie and Jane.
Yep.
have we only just started getting previously on things?
This is the first one that I've ever seen. Yeah,
it is. Okay, yeah, because it did the previously on, and I was like, what the fuck? I did not remember them doing that before.
They didn't even do it during the 2-parter. Interestingly, so I don't know why they chose this one to remind us what was going on. I wonder if it continues. I don't think I've ever seen it before, so I wonder if it's a new thing. Yeah, it is just Max now. It's not HBO Max, so maybe that's the
stupidest stupid thing.
How could they get rid of HBO in the name? That's the only reason that people want it.
And the weirdest thing is, Cinemax exists.
Yeah, it's still
it did. I don't know if it does anymore, but it did.
The branding of HBO and HBO Max still, I only think of condoms. Looking at that brand, it's like the purple background with the curvy letters. It looks like a condom wrapper.
It does. It looks like a Durex ad.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like it's the HBO is your selling point.
Yes. Everything else is additive. It's not the reason that you've been here. You
yeah.
know? No one's signing up for Discovery Go or whatever it is.
Right. And honestly, I don't think the change tells you they've added anything.
No,
because that's the whole thing. Oh, we're merging with Discovery. It's like, well, you're still just showing me HBO shit on the ads.
Yeah, it should just be. It should just be. We just made HBO better. That's the only ad that they need. Call it HBO. I don't know. I don't know why they need to brand it so confusingly.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I guarantee you, it's something that was just committed to death.
Yeah. Well, it's like if the Oscars absorbed the Tonys and you're like, we're not going to call it the Oscars anymore. It's like, well, no one's really tuning in for the Tonys here. So just stick with it.
It's like if the Oscars absorbed the Tonys and the new award ceremony was called like the Pickles.
Yes.
Like nothing about that tells me what this is.
What is this? Yeah, at all. You've lost all identity. Oh, Saul has the great line, if money had to be cleaned before it was recirculated, we'd still be living in fucking caves, which is funny.
Yeah, that's a good line. I liked after that when he was like, well, your dad, and he's like, no, that one was mine.
That's mine. What do you think of Saul at this point in the show?
He seems to be taking a bit of a backseat to some other stuff.
Yeah.
I assume he'll come back at some point.
How do you I guess I'm kind of noticing there was a little bit of production drama around it, which is that I didn't really want to bring this up too early, but we might as well go out with it now, is that Powers Booth is apparently a very difficult actor to work with.
Oh, really? Does that surprise me? I'm going to say no.
No. Yeah, so eventually, we haven't seen a lot of Cy in this one, but we will see more of him, and there might be more to speak about it later. But he was apparently very difficult, and it's kind of an old Hollywood style, which is that he was very concerned about if he was winning scenes, really. So it was kind of like a competitive thing for him.
Oh, weird.
And didn't get along with a lot of the other cast members and stuff like that. But I feel that Cy is kind of an example of the backgrounding of characters, and I'm remembering now why I brought it up, is that Powers Booth was concerned that his character was not being portrayed correctly in the second season. And I think a lot of it is just that, like, I don't know how you feel about it or if you've noticed at this point, but it seems like Milch was prone to becoming bored with characters relatively quickly.
100%.
Yeah. So
it's very, very clear.
He introduces new characters, and some of the old ones drop off a little bit. And I don't know if, not that I would agree that things have to change for the plot and stuff like that, but it's certainly a case of like there probably is more that could be squeezed out of the characters. But I was thinking about the line of understanding when you have fucked out a character is kind of difficult to identify until it happens. You know what I mean? Like,
sure, yeah.
So it's the Belichick thing of like cut them before they start to get too old, really, and stuff like that. But it does leave you a little bit wanting sometimes when the characters have been passed over a little bit. I think they'll save Cy. I think that's more Powers Booth being upset that he's not as prominent in this season, but they're doing something with Cy that I think makes sense with how much screen time he's getting. So,
yeah, that's interesting.
Let's see. I guess that's it. Anything else you want to say about Requiem for a Gleet? Are you glad the kidney stones are gone?
Yeah, I'll be happy to see see Al back up. I thought Gleet. I assumed it was some sort of slur. I didn't know they were talking about it.
Yeah, the crystals.
Yeah.
Yep.
The other thing, I thought the Sarah Paulson stuff was interesting.
Oh yeah, we haven't talked about that. Yeah, we should talk about that. Yeah. What did you think about it?
Well, because there was that one episode before where I thought that she was up to something malicious.
Yep.
And she seems to be up to something again here, but I'm not really sure what it is. And I couldn't remember if she and Bosch had some sort of relationship.
That was my big question. I was like, have these two met in this show? And I don't think they have met.
I don't think so.
No, yeah. So
it was kind of weird to see them interact in that way.
Yeah, that stuck out to me as so she gets fired. The firing scene was fine. I thought that all made sense in context and stuff like that. Her going to see Silas and explain that she thinks that Alma is trying to kill her, so she needs protection from Silas. That really felt like oh shit, we need to get this into the script somehow. Like, how are we going to do it? And they had laid no groundwork. People can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure those characters have not met each other yet. So they just exposition a whole bunch of we have met previously, or maybe not even exposition. They just play the scene as if the viewer is supposed to assume that these two know who each other are and that they're comfortable with each other.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is where this show, I'm on the fence about it, because it's like you're saying, it's so oblique that they're cut. They don't do it a ton, but there are some times where I feel like they cut corners a little bit to just be like, who cares? Yeah, they met off screen in between episodes last week. Who cares? Whatever. Let's just. So it's like, it'll bother you or it doesn't.
Yes. Well, I mean, do you? For some reason, it doesn't really bother me. I don't think. I don't know how you feel about it, but it is like it does tread. It's another one of these fine line things. It treads dangerously close to the kind of modern criticism of like, if something isn't said, it's kind of like a problem as to why this has happened. And I think that this one just kind of sticks out to me because I don't know why it's. I think it's the familiarity. Like, they didn't even really do the scene as if he was like, "Who the fuck are you?" Coming into this room or anything like that.
Like it. Honestly, all you would need is like a scene where they pass each other in the street or something.
Right,
like I don't think they've ever been on screen at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
And so it just feels a little bit. It makes you feel like they know each other from before any of this, which if that's the intention, that's fine. But if not, I don't know. It feels a little weird. Yeah. Like, it doesn't really bother me, but it's another layer of things that you kind of have to parse out in some scenes where it's already difficult to parse out what's going on.
Yeah. I'd agree. All right, so I guess we're done with Requiem for a Gleet. So my just final thoughts about it are that I really liked this one. I like the dialogue and I like all the character interactions. I like the showing how important Swearengen is to the camp by eliminating him and having everyone else sort of respond to it. Mm-hmm. I like this. I do like this idea of. It's something that the show has always been kind of doing, but it's sort of broadening the scope now. Is that Milch's fascination with the way that this like abstract idea of the gold being valuable, right, causes this whole chain of events to spread out to different characters who come in at different points in the story and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's so funny that it all stems from just like digging this rock out of the ground, and that like that becomes the value, and then it builds a town around it. And then like the people come together, and then people from out of town who have more of the rock themselves come in and take the rock from everybody else. And I don't know, there's something like sort of profound about it. You know that I think we talked, that Rich Dad Poor Dad book, right?
Oh yeah.
That like personal finance book. The author's kind of nutty, but he does hit on something in that book that's like kind of vital, which is that like, and it's represented in the show, is that you can't work for wages, right? Like, you can't be at the bottom. You're just never going to be wealthy if you work at the bottom.
Sure.
And it's not because you, like, even if you're paid a lot, it's still possible to not be very wealthy just because you're doing all, like, the work that's being paid for, and you're not able to, like, maximize your money outside of that. And what I like about this is that it shows like the miners do this thing and they get sort of ripped off, and they've been putting like their back in, like breaking their back doing all the work and stuff like that. And they come out with this meager amount of cash out of it, while Hearst, who's backed by this tremendous amount of capital, doesn't really have to do anything to get all of it for himself. And it just shows the fact of like, you want to, that's what the Rich Dad Poor Dad book says. It's just, you have to move out of that into a realm where your money is the thing that makes the money for you. If you want to actually be wealthy, you can't do work for it. You have to, you have to build off of it. Basically, you start with work and then you build into other things. But I think the show just represents that kind of cleverly in how Hearst operates and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, once you get as much money as Hearst, you're good to go.
You're good to go. Except Hearst is driven to a fault, I think. Hearst will never retire, I don't think. I love George Hearst in the show, so I'm looking forward to seeing him. He's fantastic. That's it. Do you have any final thoughts about this one?
No, I thought it was good. I continue to be fascinated with the structure of the show, and I do think it's Milch's what's the word I'm looking for here? His tendency to be, his attention to be grabbed by different things.
Yep.
Very quickly makes me wonder how certain things are going to play out, if they're going to be satisfactorily resolved. Like the stuff with the Chez Amis, something about that just has, we drop this halfway through the season written all over it. You know what I mean? Like there's something about it where I'm not really sure what they're doing with it, where it's going. If an episode rolls around halfway through where Maddie gets a bullet in her head and Joni just like leaves town, I won't be surprised.
Yeah. I guess just because do you feel it's too tertiary to the actual town, or do you feel it's just not clicking with the other stories in any way? Because it mostly is just functioning as a Wolcott thing.
Yeah, it feels a little peripheral.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's I'm not totally sure. I'm not totally sold on whatever Maddie's whole thing is.
Yep.
And I don't think Joni has really been front and center enough in what they're doing to make me that invested in it.
Yep. I love Maddie's line about they get led around by their dicks, and if we get let ourselves get led around by our cunts, then we give up our one power over them.
Yes,
which is very good. Yeah, I find that more interesting just through the sort of dynamics of what they're doing there, which is that Maddie's willing to go to a level here where sacrificing the girl, which is Joni's having a hard time doing at this point.
I guess the thing that I'm missing from that stuff is I'm not really sure what Joni wants at this point.
Yeah.
She seems like she's it seems like it has switched over to Maddie's story.
Yep.
And I don't totally feel any attachment to her because she just kind of breezed into town 2 episodes ago. So
yeah. I mean, I guess it's just that Joni's story is to be the better angel there, where you disagree with selling out yourselves for what the possibility of fortune might come from it. Taking a stand against, like, how far do you have to go with the Johns, really? Like, what's allowable and what's not allowable and stuff like that. But we'll see where Joni and Maddie can get to. That's it. Thanks, everybody, for listening. You can support the show at patreon.com/The Penske File if you enjoyed that. There's all the other shows are up there, too. There's all the other shows at thepenskyfile.com. You go to the Patreon. There's the YouTube, blah, 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 all that good stuff. I don't think there's anything else really to say. Thank you for listening and leaving comments. And we've had like new reviews on iTunes, which is always exciting, from names I don't recognize. And they say they found the show just looking for a Deadwood podcast, which is very nice.
Nice.
Appreciate it.
Mission accomplished.
SEO accomplished. Clay, do you have anything you want to say? So thanks, everybody, for listening to this show. We're almost halfway through Deadwood, so we're moving. But do you have anything you want to say, Clay?
Yeah, check out the Rotten Horror Picture Show stuff we're doing on Patreon. We're doing the Video Nasties this year. I found out I think I may have talked about this a little bit previously, but my dentist listens to that podcast.
Oh, really?
Which I find really fun. And I was like, oh, that's so great that you listen. She's like, yeah, I've only listened to a couple, like 15. And I was like, oh.
Drowns out the sounds of people screaming in the dental chair.
But I have a comic book out right now, the first issue of Batman White Knight Presents Generation Joker, which is a long title, and I would like to see it broken down into like letters. That'd be fun. White Knight Presents Generation Joker #1 is out right now, that I co-wrote with Katana Collins and Sean Murphy, and issue 2 comes out sometime in June, like mid-June, I think. So check it out.
Yep. So it'll be coming out right around the time that this podcast comes out. Thanks everybody for listening. You can join the Discord as our last little thing to plug. That's it. We're done with Requiem for a Gleet. The next episode is simply called Complications. So I'm sure things go swimmingly for everybody. Thanks again for listening to Something Pretty. We will see you next time.